You've probably never heard of Anthropic, and that's exactly the problem, because in the next few months, it could become one of the most valuable publicly traded companies in the world. And if you have an index fund, the same mechanism that put SpaceX in your retirement account without asking you could be about to do it again. Anthropic confidentially filed its IPO paperwork with the SEC on June 1, 2026. It raised $65 billion in its most recent funding round at a valuation of $965 billion, nearly $1 trillion. It is targeting a public listing as early as October 2026. And most people watching the financial news have never heard its name, have no idea what it actually does, and have absolutely no understanding of the story underneath the numbers. So let's fix that, because this one has everything. Extraordinary growth, a genuinely interesting business, a war with the Pentagon, and a valuation that requires a very particular kind of faith in the future. Anthropic was founded in 2021 by Dario and Daniela Amodei, and a group of researchers who left OpenAI. From the beginning, it positioned itself differently, not just as an AI company trying to build the most powerful model, but as an AI safety company trying to build the most powerful model responsibly. Its flagship product is Claude. If you've used it, you know it. If you haven't, it's one of the 2 or 3 most capable AI systems in the world right now. The growth numbers are genuinely staggering. At the end of 2025, Anthropic's annualized revenue run rate was around $9 billion. By May 2026, 5 months later, Anthropic said its revenue run rate had crossed $47 billion. That means its current revenue pace, annualized, not full-year realized revenue. But even with that caveat, a more than 5-fold increase in 5 months is something no enterprise software company in recorded history has matched at this scale. 8 of the Fortune 10 are customers. Around 80% of revenue comes from enterprises, not consumers paying $20 a month, but corporations embedding Claude into their coding workflows, legal review systems, financial analysis tools, and healthcare operations. Claude Code alone, a tool that writes and edits software, accounts for an estimated $2.5 billion in annualized revenue as of early 2026. SemiAnalysis estimated that Claude Code was authoring about 4% of all public GitHub commits worldwide. That's not a demo. That's infrastructure. That's a product so deeply embedded in how developers work that switching costs become real very quickly. And unlike most of the AI companies you've heard about, Anthropic is approaching profitability. The company projected its first profitable quarter in Q2 2026, expecting $10.9 billion in quarterly revenue. That would make it the first major AI lab to reach that milestone while still growing at this rate. For context, OpenAI burned $3.7 billion in Q1 2026 alone, even while generating $5.7 billion in revenue. Anthropic appears to be getting there faster. But here's where it gets complicated. The valuation math at $965 billion requires scrutiny. Anthropic reports a meaningful portion of its revenue on a gross basis, counting total end customer cloud spending routed through Amazon, Google, and Microsoft reseller arrangements rather than just its own net take. That inflates the headline number relative to competitors who report differently. The growth is real, the comparability is not. And investors paying nearly $1 trillion need to understand exactly what they're buying. And if this were just a private market story, most people could ignore it. The problem is that Anthropic is trying to become public at exactly the moment index funds are being pushed to absorb megacap IPOs faster than before. And then, even the Pentagon comes into play. In February 2026, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth declared Anthropic a supply chain risk, a designation previously reserved exclusively for foreign adversaries like Chinese state-linked companies. The reason? Anthropic had 2 red lines in its government contracts. It would not allow Claude to be used in autonomous weapons without human oversight, and it would not allow Claude to be used for mass domestic surveillance. The Pentagon said it needed unrestricted access. Anthropic said no, and Hegseth responded by branding it a national security threat. A federal judge saw it very differently. In a 43-page ruling, U.S. District Judge Rita Lynn wrote that the Pentagon's designation was classic illegal First Amendment retaliation, punishing Anthropic for publicly disagreeing with the government's contracting position. She blocked enforcement of the designation. The Pentagon appealed. The appeals court appeared divided when arguments were heard in May 2026. The case is still live. This matters for investors for a straightforward reason. Anthropic says the Pentagon's actions could reduce its 2026 revenue by multiple billions of dollars. Government contracts and defense-adjacent work represent a meaningful part of its addressable market. And a company going public at nearly $1 trillion valuation with an unresolved constitutional lawsuit against the Department of Defense sitting in its S1 risk factors is not a standard IPO. Then, in June 2026, a separate problem emerged. Anthropic launched its most advanced models, Fable 5 and Mythos 5, on June 9th. 3 days later, a Commerce Department export control order forced both models offline worldwide. They remained down for weeks before the order was lifted on June 30th. The timing, right as Anthropic was beginning its IPO process, could not have been worse. The episode showed how quickly a single regulatory action can disrupt the entire business, and it will sit in the risk factors of whatever S1 eventually becomes public. So, what does this mean for you? The SpaceX situation established the pattern. NASDAQ rewrote its rules in 2026, cutting the path for newly public megacaps to enter major indexes within just 15 trading days, and removing the old minimum float requirement entirely. Anthropic has not yet confirmed which exchange it will list on, but if it lists on NASDAQ, if it qualifies under those fast entry rules, and if NASDAQ adds it to the NASDAQ 100, the same passive buying mechanism that put SpaceX in your retirement account could activate again. Your index fund doesn't ask whether nearly $1 trillion is a reasonable price. It just buys. The difference with Anthropic versus SpaceX is that Anthropic's revenue growth is real and accelerating in a way SpaceX's consolidated financials are not. The bull case is more defensible. A company growing fivefold in 5 months, with 8 of the Fortune 10 as customers, and projecting its first profitable quarter is a fundamentally different story than a company losing $5 billion per year propped up by one profitable division. But the bear case is also real. Nearly $1 trillion values Anthropic at roughly 20 times its annualized run rate. And that run rate may be inflated by gross revenue reporting. The Pentagon lawsuit represents a genuine operational risk that could reduce revenue by billions. The export control episode showed how quickly regulatory action can disrupt the business, and OpenAI filed its own confidential IPO just days after Anthropic, meaning the two most directly competitive AI companies in the world are racing each other to public markets simultaneously, which is either exciting or a warning sign, depending on how you read it. The honest answer is that Anthropic is probably the most interesting company going public in 2026. The safety positioning is real. The growth is real. The product is genuinely embedded in serious enterprise workflows. The path to profitability is closer than any other frontier AI lab. But nearly $1 trillion is a very large price for a company projecting its first profitable quarter, fighting a constitutional lawsuit with the Pentagon, and about to enter public markets at the same time as its most direct competitor. The fine print on this one is worth reading, and most people won't.